Can you believe it? This is the way it used to be in this country. Hard to imagine. A mere little over 100 years ago, this fantastic set of advertising images. You know, we live in a world so bombarded with images that it is easy to forget that the images are working on us. We might think we're participatory, and to some extent, of course, we are, but we are also constant recipients and, in a way, victims of images. They deploy meaning. It seeps into the cracks. So it's pretty easy to tell what the messages of these advertising images are. And if you were doing a study of the society of the United States of America in the 19th and 20th to early 21st centuries, you would definitely show something like this and use it to illustrate the very clear social roles that the male and female members of that society were expected to play out, aspire to, obey, conform to, etc. And as the 20th century moved on, it wouldn't strike you that change was too dramatic. So this is a fantastic, I love these advertisements. I wish I could teach a class just about this stuff. Somebody here must do that. Not me, though. I'm stuck in the past. Every so often I break out. This is from 1933, in case you were wondering. And, isn't this fantastic? Look at this. Happy man. I don't know whether he's on his way to work or he's coming home. I think he's on his way to work because he has the newspaper tucked under his arm, but maybe that's the afternoon paper. Those were the days when there were actually papers in the afternoon as well, right? Evening papers. And everybody's happy. They're very pleased with their place and their role. Fantastic. 1999. What is the most salient demographic difference in the years between, say, 1940 and 1990, as opposed to 1890 and 1940? That is two different 50-year periods. What's the most salient demographic shift? I'll give you a hint. Think about the name of my generation. Yes, I'm a baby boomer, born in 1955. I'm a total middle-of-the-road baby boomer, smack in the middle of the baby boom generation. And what does the name of that generation tell you about what modern sociologists think is the most salient demographic difference between the 50 years between 1940 and 1990, as opposed to the 50 years between 1890 and 1940? I don't know why that's doing that. It's bad. I'm going to move this down. Salient demographic difference. What is it? Why is my generation called baby boomers? Because there are a lot of us. What's the most salient demographic shift? But a prime mover even before that. This is fundamental. Well, wouldn't we like to know? For those of you over here that didn't hear, they had more sex. But who was there to have more sex? There were more people. There was a huge increase in population. Population is not a steady state phenomenon. It goes up, it goes down, right? So in Greece, just to take a little backtrack here, in Greece, after the late Bronze Age, what happens? Population goes down. It goes down dramatically. We don't have massive cemeteries. It's not like everybody dies. There's not a plague. But a lot of people leave. Some people stay. We know that for sure. We know that some people stay because the language stays the same. We have those diminishingly complex but still similar pottery styles. But the number of people overall goes down. It goes way down. And for a couple of hundred years, it stays down. And then, after another 100 years or so, it starts to inch back up. Well, population numbers, raw numbers, don't really push in modern Western world until after World War II. And the reason is if you take one of these modern quarters, the reason is pretty straightforward, and that is that we didn't get any more efficient at producing food. There wasn't a way to feed a lot more people. But as the Industrial Revolution and ability to produce a lot more food came on, more people, not just the United States, but in Europe as well, there were a lot more people. What happens when you start to get a huge demographic shift? Yes, yes, women enter the workforce. In general, what happens is you get social change. All you folks, all you young'uns, that's one of your jobs, is to make the world your world, not the world of your parents and your grandparents, a new world. That's how social change happens. This is how we can recognize it. So, what we have started to look at last time in class, and what we will think about hard today and Thursday, is what are the changes that happen in the Greek world, in Greek society, that we can spot. What will be the way we'll spot those changes? Well, we've got a few different phenomena that we're going to look at, and the first is pictures. Like this crater. Pictures appear kind of suddenly in the 8th century BCE. It's not that nobody could have made they couldn't make pictures before, and now all of a sudden they could. It's that now there is a real need for these pictures. Why? Because there's a big population surge in the 8th century BCE, which you all know from reading Whitley. We get a lot more settlements. We get a lot more cemeteries. We get evidence that there are a lot more people. Those people are you, the new generation. And they are figuring out how to organize themselves. When you get a whole bunch more people all of a sudden, lots of new stresses on the social fabric. And for every action, there's an equal and an opposite reaction. So, some of the remains that we're going to look at from the 8th century BCE, they are the action. They're what's being created. And some of them are the reaction of the older folks, more conservative folks, more traditional folks, reacting to some of these new ideas and new changes. Okay, so one of the conclusions that we came to last time at the end of the hour when we were looking at this fantastic spouted basin, late geometric attic, 750 to 700, second half of the 8th century BCE, is that it delineated a kind of, a set of ideas about gender roles. In fact, lots of the pictures on geometric pots will communicate to us how genders are being defined. That is, if you're a male, what are the expectations? And if you're a female, what are the expectations? So, what are the expectations? What's your role? Fellas, this means you. Yeah, so men are armed and dangerous. They have weapons. They have spears. They have shields. So this is a fragment, obviously, fantastic little fragment found in Athens. We'd like to know what the larger scene is. So there are men and there are weapons. These guys are also, some weapons are coming at them. Huh? You can see this arrow just coming right over this guy's head. Either they're in the thick of a hunt, or they're in the thick of combat. We can't decide which one. What about this? On a boat. What possible activities? What do you think? You with the Minnesota T-shirt on.
Well, it looked like he was doing some combat too, because the guy got a bow and arrow on the upper right.
Right? Yep. Right. So maybe these guys are warriors going out to sea. Again, it's a little, because we only have this fragment. We can't be sure if they're traders, they're just arming themselves, or whether they're actually in a battle and they're pushing off. But one thing that you definitely can deduce from both of these fragments about men is what are some expectations of men in the 8th century BCE in Greece?
That they're warriors?
They're warriors. Yeah, they got to be ready to fight. They're armed. What about this?
More combat?
Maybe it's combat. What do you not see? Weapons. Right, you don't see weapons. Could be boxing. So it could be a contest, and it could be a fight. Of course, it's not like we're talking about two totally separate things there. But there's some gray area between those two poles. But anyway, these guys are at the same level. They're the same size. They're depicted as the same size. Maybe all this is making fists. It's hard not to think about, what are those things? Brass knuckles? And neither one is shown as getting the better of the other. So those are all clues that might make you think this activity is what? Yeah, boxing. Something that is not for keeps, not for high stakes. It's just sort of, hey, as if that's fun. I don't know. Maybe some of you think that's fun. What's going on here? Hunting. Yeah, this for sure is hunting because animals. Yeah, right. So happily we've got the whole scene here. Here's a weirdo. What's this? Shields. They have shields. You all the way in the back with the stocking cap on your head. What's going on? It almost looks like a celebration. What makes you think that? What are they doing? All the way in the back of my shirt.
They're all holding hands.
They're holding hands.
None of them are holding their weapons, but all their weapons are messed up in the back. So they've done a battle, or they're about to go to battle. Like a pre-battle celebration, and fight process of celebration.
Yeah, it looks like it's some sort of celebration, right? They're marked for battle. They're marked. They've got shields. They've got spears. So they've got helmets, unless you think that they've sprouted tails on the tops of their heads. Those things are helmets, or else they're the sort of hats we wear around here in the wintertime that have those things that go. But their weapons are at their side. Yeah, all the way in back. It's a dance, actually. Who's they? Who's they? Today, you mean? The fact that they're holding hands and they're in a circle suggests that it's a dance. At the moment, they've all got their feet both on the ground, but maybe the artist was a little challenged by showing them, executing a chorus line maneuver. Because? Right. Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? It sort of looks like, it's a little hard to tell because, this silhouette style, it's a little baffling. Like, is that the peak of a helmet? Is that their nose? Is that their chin? Is that somebody's chin? Could that possibly be a chin? It's very large. This is the problem with black and white and silhouette styles. Just a lot of details are missing. Soon we'll get to black figure. All will be revealed. Won't be a problem anymore. Right now it's a little ambiguous. But it does kind of appear that there might be some singing or chanting going on. So before a battle, that's one possibility. After a battle, that's another possibility. What are other events in which some kind of dance of armed warriors, what are some possible events that you can imagine? A ceremony of what sort? Like an initiation. Oh, an initiation ceremony. Oh, that's a good idea. An initiation ceremony. Maybe it is something like that. Another idea. Could be a cult. Could be a cult. Another idea. Funerals. Because you would have a procession or dancing at a funeral. Another idea.
Possibly like a reenactment of like a battle that took place.
Possibly some kind of, remember that awesome battle? Let's all get together, brothers, and participate. Yeah, so some kind of, bonding experience. Shared. That is to say, in fact, in a way, not some sort of standard social ritual, but something more casual.
One thing I noticed, the shields aren't the same. Some are square and some are circular. Perhaps it could be two opposing sides doing a peace treaty.
Oh, what a beautiful harmonic idea. Possibly. Possibly. Yeah. Although then you might want to have only two shields. And in fact, you've got, some are circular and some are square, but even they have different shield emblems on them. So it's more like there's a lot of individuals, maybe. Other possible ceremonies or rituals or events.
Like praying, either Athena or Ares and God.
Could have something to do with the cult to a warrior deity. Of course, we don't have any evidence yet for a warrior deity. That'd be a little problem with that as a possibility. It could be. You mean, is there evidence for ritual activity at places other than Mycenaean tombs? Is that what you mean?
I know that they use God.
We have evidence for activity at places that are sanctuary sites. We're actually going to talk about that in more detail next time. But pertinent to that, does anybody know what the canonical date of the first Olympic Games is? Correct. And what century would that be? That's our century. That's where we are right now, the 8th century BCE, yes. So there are athletic contests that have already begun. And so perhaps this is sort of a context. There's one last kind of life event, possible ceremony at which something like this could be going on. That's a wedding. All right, that's another sort of big fancy schmancy ritual. Would that we knew. But you can see it in the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. We just won't go there. We'll just move on. So what I forgot to say before I showed this, now totally ruining the surprise, is who's been missing? Yeah, right, thank you. Women. And so what might you think about the fact that there are so few scenes with women? What's another change? So far we've seen, now we've got this one. Here they are. Here are the girls and the boys. And what's the one other scene that we've seen with a woman? The abduction / possible marriage. So, what is one of the messages that pottery pictures from the 8th century BC might be giving us about shifting social roles in the Greek world by this time? What do you make of the absence, in other words, of women?
They've lost their importance or the level of importance that they had.
Yeah, we don't have any evidence that they have some larger role to play in the social universe. Their role is circumscribed and quite specifically defined. What kind of vessel is this? What would you use it for? You see it's got a handle. It's about this big. Well, it's got a... It's cup. What's this? Jug. What's this? What kind of vessel is this? Amphora. This amphora is about this high. You know, it's maybe about as high as the top of this table. So I don't know, a little under 3 feet. Jug is about this big. The mug is like a coffee cup. What events might these specific vessels accompany? This is not a hard question. Actually, I probably shouldn't have said events. I should have said activities. That's what I should have said, activities. Feasting, eating. Yeah. This is, in other words, tableware. Where are the messages of the... What's going on here, incidentally? Can you tell what's going on? This is cute. This is very cute. Can you see it? Oh, yeah, I don't think they're branding. But they're... Branding is a little... Oh, no. 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 Why? Because this guy looks armed, and this guy looks armed, like an extension of his arm is this thing with an arrow on the end. But see that this fellow is holding what looks like a crop, right? Yeah, they're just gathering them in, playing with horses. So the context in which these various messages, guys parading around with shields, guys parading around in chariots, in processions with horses, more guys parading around in chariots with horses, guys hanging out with horses, guys and horses and weapons. Yeah. So what's going on? Why is it that we get pictures on these sorts of vessels? Again, this is not a hard question. I don't know. Has anybody ever had a mug with a message on it? Yeah. Okay. Why? Yeah. Right. Well, that mug with a message, that's not for you. For one thing, when you're drinking out of it, you can't see it. Right? Message is on the outside. It's for somebody else looking at it to see it. I am the world's greatest, fill in the blank. So everybody can see. So the context, what's the context? Where might you expect to find vessels like this? But so what archaeological context? What place? People might be buried with them, but even before that, houses. Yeah. Find these in houses. Exactly. Find these in domestic contexts. These are domestic vessels. What's the point? All of a sudden, we start to see these messages being transmitted in people's everyday lives, in regular contexts. You have dinner, party, you have a party where people are drinking, right? You put wine in this, you pour, you scoop some of it into the jug, and then you serve it by pouring it into these mugs. Everybody's sitting around drinking, and these are the pictures that everybody sees. These are the messages that you take in, and these are the roles, the social roles that are defined for you over and over and over.
Were all the ones that we've seen so far domestic?
Mm-hmm. Sir?
I just got a question on, do you get mixing wine with water?
Well, the evidence would be the pots. I mean, we don't have any literary evidence that is necessarily reflective of 8th century BC practice. But we do have amphoras in which stuff could be mixed. And we also have craters, that is, big bowls with wider mouths in which stuff could be mixed, and then they're like a punch bowl. And then you could dip out stuff for serving. So it would suggest that we do. And we start to get those vessels in the 8th century. We don't have them before that. So that suggests that it's now that these kinds of social roles are, or activities, are being developed. What's the most salient difference between these two amphoras? Back there in the pink. Nice color. I like that color. One is a belly amphora and one is a neck amphora. That is a difference. Let's do it like this. Let's come up with differences, and then we'll decide what's the most salient difference. There are pictures on one and no pictures on the other. That's a difference. Tell me another difference.
The belly to neck ratio is really different.
The shape is really different. They both have two handles. The belly amphora has two little completely ridiculous handles on its belly, but it does have handles.
The belly amphora is solid.
Absolutely true. There's a lot more paint on the belly amphora. There's a lot more solid places of color. Let me get somebody in the back here. So far, all you guys have talked about is what they look like. So this one is a funerary amphora. Now, actually, ultimately, it could have been that this is a funerary amphora. We don't really know, but for sure, what we know about the creation of this vessel is that it was made for a funerary context. And what else? You know what this drawing is? What's this in the drawing? Yeah, it's a stone cover. That means that this amphora is underground. Who could see it? Nobody. Nobody. I would say that the most salient difference is that this one was made to send a message to whoever could see it. Now, one context in which these pictures on pots sent a message was just regular life, domestic life. So you have a dinner party, or people come over, you sit around and drink, and there are vessels that you use. There's some larger event, a wedding, so some larger ceremony. There are vessels that have pictures on them and send a message. In the 8th century BCE, we know that in Athens, at least, funerary rites changed to include a public set of events. So you're looking at a picture of a grave from Athens from the 9th century BCE, and it's not this grave, but it's another one like it. The cremation pot is underground. Wouldn't have been able to see it. There are lots and lots of graves, more and more in the 8th century than in the 9th century in Athens. And one of the things that happens is this. In addition to the ashes of a person being put inside a vessel, down at the bottom of a large pit, another special kind of vessel was made that acted as a marker. And so it stuck part way up out of the ground. And here you see a cross section that shows vessels like that with partially sticking out of the ground. The burial, the actual burial, is way down here. These are not burial vessels. The ashes were not inside these. These were, in effect, gravestones, or tombstones, these pots. And as such, they had to be pretty large. So here you see a photograph of one of the most famous of these sorts of vessels in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, with some admiring college students standing around looking at it. And you get a sense, if you would go to the Metropolitan Museum in New York, or, well, lots of museums, but there's some pretty spectacular versions of these. When you first walk into the ancient classical art gallery, there are these huge, I mean, bigger than me, some of them, which just goes to show you how big they are, pots with pictures painted on them, just gigantic. All right, so here's that pot that these people are admiring, and as you see, it's got a little scene on it. Now you can imagine that it was buried up until about here. So it actually happens to have a lot of painting on it that probably would have been under the ground, but for sure this would have been above the ground. This amphora, and it is an amphora because it has two handles, comes from a cemetery in Athens called the Dipylon, so it is called the Dipylon amphora. Not that there weren't other amphoras that come from the Dipylon cemetery, there are. But this is the biggest and the best and the most famous, and so this is the Dipylon amphora. Late geometric, last half of the 8th century BCE. Here's the scene. First of all, who's buried in this amphora? A woman. How do you know? Well, that's true in the scene. And it's also, you would have known it no matter how she was depicted because of the type of amphora it is. You remember that these belly amphoras are the ones for the ladies. So this is another instance of pictures at work, and it's another context, one of the few, that includes women. All right. What you want to do here is take 30 seconds to a minute and quickly, either on your own or talking to the person next to you, write down as many things as you can reconstruct about the funeral as you can from looking at this picture. Okay, let's start. Let's go down the road that starts with you in the matching to me purple sweater. It looks like a child. Where? Yes, look at that. Do you see? This child is holding on to the leg of this thing. What's this thing? Next person. The thing that the child is holding on to. Yeah, some place for the dead person to lay. We actually have a good word for this in English, and it's a bier, B-I-E-R. A bier is a place for the dead person to lay. It's pretty much confined to dead people, biers. So you have a child, you have a bier, and on the bier is what? Next person. The dead woman, what's this? That is weird, eh? What is this? Yeah, something covering her. Something covering her. Why is it drawn that way? It's even all cut out in some odd way. Look at that. That is so weird. Why is that? Did it have a big hole in it? Well, there is something over her, and you can still see her. That's really the key. If it was translucent, it probably wouldn't have a design on it. It's got a little checkerboard design on it so that you can tell that it's probably woven. It's woven. You would not normally be able to see through it. But you need to be able to see through it. Why do you need to be able to see through it? Next person. Yeah, so that you know that there's a body under there. Exactly. So the artist has got it both ways, coming and going. This is very good, very clever of this artist. This artist shows you the shroud and the body, and you get both together. One doesn't block out the other. So you have a child, you have a bier, you have a body, but that's weird, isn't it? Why is it weird that you have a body? What?
I'm wondering whether this is creative license by the painter, but the symmetry of the entire thing indicates that maybe people were watching it.
Like that there's a
Audience.
that there are a group of people around. Yes. And what are they doing? This is weird. Stretching? What are they doing? What are these people doing? What do you imagine these people are doing? Wailing, crying. They are in distress. Right, they're in some distress. So you know how you like this sort of thing. Except for a couple people are both in distress and also working. See the two? This is very nice. They are holding up the shroud. Now, why is it weird, just to go back to my question before that I let you off the hook on, why is it weird that we have a body in the depiction of this burial? Next person. That would be you. Right. This is a cremation. How do we know it's a cremation? Well, it's actually not going inside this vessel. This is the marker vessel. Well, the burials at this time are generally not always cremations, but vessels like this mark cremation burials. Vessels like this mark cremation burials. That is, vessels like this stand up over burial pits in which there's a vessel that has the ashes of a body. So, it's probably not artistic license, because what is this event then actually? Next person in that row. It's a funeral. It's a ceremony. It's public. There is something happening before the body is burned and the ashes are put in the burial and in the pot, and the pot is put in the ground, and then this is put to market. There is a public ceremony. What is happening at this public ceremony? The body is on display. We know that. There are children. We know that. And so there is family involved and present and depicted, but probably more people than just family, because we've got all these people mourning. What else? What else is part of the ceremony that you can tell from this picture? What else is part of the ceremony?
It looks like there's some guy like running the ceremony. He's sitting and things.
This fellow here?
Yeah.
This fellow here? And so what is happening? What can you deduce from exactly what you're seeing? There's somebody in charge. We don't actually know who he is, but he is speaking. He has stopped with two hands to his head, silent mourning thing, and the artist is definitely showing him doing something else. He's in charge of leading the ceremony. Gender? Gender? Female. Right. So there are women, men, children, and for sure, what can you deduce of the social place of the woman who is a member of this family? Probably pretty important. The pot is huge. The execution of the paint is very fine. The picture itself sends a message because this is the first time we get depictions of a funerary ceremony. And this is public. People would have walked by and seen it. So the message is, this is an upper class woman. Two things mark her: her gender, by the way that she's definitely depicted and by the type of pot, and her social class. Both of those mark her. Now, this sort of scene, these of the laying out of a body, has a specific name. In Greek art, it's called a prothesis, from the Greek word meaning to lay out, to place in front of or place before, something like that. And it's I was just about to say it's very common, but that's not exactly true. It's not like we've got hundreds of these things, but we do have about 50 of them. So there must have been quite a few hundred people living in Athens at any one given moment. So not everybody, and not even most people, were buried with a vessel that had a prothesis scene, but enough people were that we can say that the elements of this reflect upper class burials in Athens now, in the 8th century BC.
Was the actual physical act of cremation public also? Or was that done like after?
Have no idea. This is what we got. Yeah, so we are, this is what we got. So these are some more prothesis scenes from Greek pots, and you can see all the elements that you guys have talked about. You've got the body on a bier. Sometimes the bier is in a specific place, the home. Sometimes it's already en route. So this is a bier that's been put on a chariot. That really must have been tricky to get that thing up there. So sometimes the bier is at home. Like I say, there are always family members. Look here. See the small child on the lap of this person? It's very touching. So there are family members, there are men, there are women, there are mourners, lots of them, men and women. So there are these various canonical events. Also from the Dipylon Cemetery, 8th century BCE, a huge crater that also marked a cremation burial and was buried up until about here, which is how come the artist didn't bother to do anything more than paint some dark colored bands on the bottom of this. What else is part of the funerary celebration or funeral? You might not want to call it a celebration. As we can tell from the Dipylon crater. Crater is just another pot name, Like amphora is a pot name. Amphora is a name for a pot with two handles. 1, 2. Crater is a name for this sort. And I know that the crater also has two handles. I know. But as you can see, the crater is a different shape. In addition to the fact that it has two handles, it has a big, wide mouth. It's like a giant punch bowl on a stand. And an amphora has a narrow mouth and a long neck. So an amphora is a vessel that you could pour things in and pour things out, but you couldn't like sort of get your hand in on there and mix stuff up. But a crater is a vessel that you could mix stuff up in. So now you know 2 pot names. You may be learning a few more pot names, but not that many. All right. What else do we know was part of funerals, let's just say funerals, in the 8th century BCE from the depictions on the Dipolon crater? A procession. A procession of horses and chariots. And who's in the procession? Is this person's natural body shape? Very strange. What is the deal with this? It's a shield, right. So they're warriors. They're warriors in a procession in conjunction with the funeral. Now you know from your careful reading of Mr. Whitley's article that among the innovations and introductions in Greece in the 8th century BCE is the spreading knowledge of Homeric epic. You know that Homeric epic is among other things, the Iliad and the Odyssey. We do not have left to us all of the stories that were spreading around in Greece, all the stories about the various heroes and their exploits at Troy and then on their way home from Troy. But we do have some of them in the books of the Iliad and the Odyssey. So that is to say that just the way that somebody 2,000 years from now, interested in trying to figure out, for example, why we would find Ralph Lauren perfume ads with some man on his knees kissing some lady's tummy reasonable and communicative of something, we would want to, in order to contextualize this strange image, we would want to perhaps see some TV shows, watch some movies, read some books from this period. In other words, we would want to know some of the stories that people were telling each other in order to make sense of the image. One of the stories that people were telling each other in 8th century Greece were stories in the Iliad and the Odyssey, and I'm going to read you a short part from one of the final books of the Iliad, Iliad 23. Iliad 23 is a kind of famous scene where the hero Achilles, who is the main fella on the Greek side, has the horrible job of organizing a funeral for almost certainly his lover. Anyway, we tend to call him, us conservative classicists, his boon companion. that sounds good. Thank you. Yikes. That's what new batteries will get you. Very loud. All right. So for those of you in podcast land, we're now in the middle of Iliad 23. Then, close mourners stayed by the place, piled up timber, built a pyre 100 feet long, this way and that way, and on the peak of the pyre they laid the body, and in front of it skinned and set in order numbers of sheep and cattle, and then beside him 2-handled jars of oil and honey leaning against the bier. They drove 4 horses aloft on the swift pyre with loud lamentation. He also killed 12 noble sons of the great-hearted Trojans with the stroke of a bronze. Then the son of Peleus turned aside and away from the burning and lay down exhausted, and sweet sleep rose over him. But now they who were with the sons of Atreus assembled together, and the sound and murmur of their oncoming wakened Achilles, who straightened himself up, sat upright, and spoke a word. Son of Atreus, you and the other greatest of all the Achaeans, put out with gleaming wine the pyre that is burning. We shall gather up the bones of Patroclus, which we shall easily tell apart, and lay his bones in a jar until I myself enfold him in Hades. And I would have you build a grave mound, which is not very great, but such as will be fitting. For now the Achaeans can make it broad and high. And then they gathered up the white bones of their companion and put them in a jar and laid it away in the shelter, covered it with a veil, laid out the tomb, and cast down the holding walls around the pyre. But then Achilles held the people there, made them sit down in a wide assembly, and brought prizes for games out of his ships, cauldrons and tripods, and horses and mules, and the powerful high heads of cattle, and fair-girdled women, and gray iron. First of all, he set forth the glorious prizes for speed of foot for the horsemen. A woman, faultless in the work of her hands, to lead away, and a tripod with ears and holding 22 measures for the first prize. And for the second he set forth a 6-year-old unbroken mare. And for the third prize he set forth a splendid cauldron with its natural gloss still upon it. And for the fourth he set out 2 talents weight of gold, and for the fifth a jar with 2 handles. And he stood upright and spoke his word out. Son of Atreus and all you other strong-grieved Achaeans, these prizes are in the place of games and wait for the horsemen. If you are a Greek in the 8th century BCE, this is your avatar. This is the big story. You hear this. You hear it sung at feasts and by traveling troubadours. This is how the great heroes of the past buried their dead. Now, these burials are of aristocrats, elite, the wealthy. This is not just anybody. And these burial scenes tell us that the funerals that these aristocrats now develop are new. What parts of this script have the elite in Greece adopted for their funerals? Are you ready? Okay, people in the back row. The procession. Absolutely. The myrmidons and all the guys on the horses. Processions. Very big deal. What else? The mourning. Lots of people standing around and mourning. We've got all those people standing around and mourning. Right. Big group of people. The funeral is public. So we would like to know if there were feasts involved. We don't actually have at this point evidence for that, but there is a suggestion that there are, not a suggestion, an indication from the way that these pots are displayed, that, and from the scenes on them with a lot of people involved, that the funeral was a public event. Right. What else? How is Patroclus, how is his body done away with? It's cremation. Right. And then what happens? You in the back there. They put his bones in a jar. Right. There's a cremation, they put his bones in a jar. But before he gets to the cremation, what happens? Well, there's a kind of gathering. But what happens to his body? Is it just, you just throw it in a corner and burn it up? Yeah, there's a public display. Exactly. So it's put on a bier, right? It's put on a bier, and everybody gathers around. There's a public viewing.
In the image that we saw before, we saw the vessel for the ashes, and then it came up like this, and it's before. Were there grave food offerings? Were they making offerings such as...
Are there offerings in cremation burials? Is that the question? Not offerings exactly, but gifts, other goods. Sure. Remember the grave from the warrior burial from the 9th century that had all sorts of stuff? Are you asking specifically about 8th century graves?
Yeah.
Yes. There continue to be things put in the burial pit. So there are goods that are put in alongside. Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. There are grave goods.
Now you mentioned that there isn't a comment on the answer report, but there isn't a little comment that we can.
Oh gosh, is that so? I'll have to look again at that picture. I have not noticed that. Cool. that would be very cool. That would be very cool. What's different? What do the Greeks of the 8th century BC say? Well, that might have been good for the heroes of olden days, but perhaps we will not pick up on that particular act.
Can you tell there's something under the beer that could look like 12 Trojan boots and 4 horses?
Yeah, right. So people do not get sacrificed along with the burial. Horses do not apparently get sacrificed along with the burial. Lots of horses are involved in the funeral, but we do not have any evidence that horses are killed in conjunction with the burial. So you know, if you're going to revive something from the past, or you're going to use some story about the past as a model, you do not feel compelled to adopt every single aspect of it. You might say, well, you know, right, we don't do that sort of thing anymore. So that is the sort of thing that's not done. The gigantic grave mound, we don't see that, right? For whatever reason. So there are some things that we don't see. Now, among the events and activities that occur in Iliad 23 in conjunction with the funeral of Patroclus, what have we not seen any evidence for yet here? Funeral games. But we have evidence for funeral games. You will be happy to hear. We do. Here is this late geometric jug called an oinakoi. You've seen it before because I used it and the inscription on it to tell you that in the 8th century BC, Greeks learned how to write again. We, because this inscription is in Greek, can read it happily. And it says, "For he who dances most gaily." In other words, it's the prize from a game. And in fact, it was found in a burial in the Diplon, same place where the crater and the amphora come from. Very wealthy cemetery in the outskirts of Athens. So this little jug was a prize. Remember the cup with the guys with shields and spears that were holding hands and looked like they were dancing? Now, what is one of the categories of prizes in Iliad 23, besides women? A category that we can find evidence, archaeological evidence of on the ground in Greece. Cauldrons and tripods. And indeed, for those of you that read Kathy Morgan's nice little 5-page bit about Athens from her wonderful, wonderful book, Athletes and Oracles, bronze tripod cauldrons start to appear in the 8th century. In not only one place, but all over Greece, and lots of places in Greece. Here you see one that was found at Olympia. And here you see a fragment of a tripod leg. You can see that the legs are flat, hammered bronze, and sometimes the legs were hammered out to have little pictures on them. And look at this picture, look at this picture. Isn't this the coolest thing? See, these two guys are fighting over, oh look, that is so cool. They're fighting over a cauldron. I won, no, I won. And here's the exact sort of cauldron that they're fighting over with these weird handle things sticking up over the top, and you can see those right there. Now, what we find a lot, what we start to find a lot at various sites are fragments of cauldrons, but also fragments of the little decorative pieces from the cauldrons, like this, which is a horse. A horse, the single most popular animal to be depicted in Greek art in the 8th century BCE. Guys with horses, on horses, horses pulling chariots, horses in funeral processions, chariots in battle, horses. Why? Because, among other things, horses are a symbol of wealth. If you have enough land to be able to have horses, just like today. Does anybody here have a horse? You know why? Because you don't have enough land. If you had enough land, you might be able to have a horse. You know anybody who has a horse, that's one of the first things you think of. Wow, you must have a lot of land. Right? Because that's what a horse needs. So in the 8th century, about 70 fragments of tripod cauldrons are found on the Acropolis in Athens. That's weird, because the Acropolis in Athens is not a cemetery. But the tripod cauldrons are prizes from games. They're prizes from funerary games organized by elite families. So, why do we find the fragments of the cauldrons that were won by individuals in athletic competitions organized in conjunction with funerals on the Acropolis in Athens?
Are they like trophies?
Trophies. They are definitely trophies. Why are they being shown in this context? Why wouldn't you just keep it in your house and then bury it with yourself? Or have somebody else bury it with you, I guess. If you're in the position of having to be buried, you cannot very well be holding on to the tripod cauldron. What's going on?
I know in later years, dying in the afterlife wasn't that great, and so instead of like burying where you were not to see it, we wanted to like bond the name.
It certainly would be something that would live on after you. It certainly would be. Why would you might put it on the Acropolis in your lifetime? So the Acropolis is a place where objects are dedicated to deities. So these are dedications. Why? You're rich. You're a member of these upper classes. Now, 100 years ago, if you were a member of an upper class, like the woman who was buried, the wealthy woman burial with the granary pyxis, remember that? That granary pyxis was an emblem of her social class. Where'd it go? In her grave. Now, you're her grandchild. You're probably her grandson, if you are able to compete and win one of these tripod cauldrons. You are her grandson, or you're the sister of her grandson. And you win one of these tripod cauldrons. You're a member of one of these wealthy families still. And instead of keeping it in your home, you dedicate it, you give it to a deity here. Why? What's the message? If you're a member of the upper class today, let's say you're a gazillionaire, you have various choices about what you're going to do with your money. You can buy a gigantic house, you can buy a gigantic boat, you can buy a gigantic whatever, you can buy art, you can do all sorts of stuff, or you can why?
Because it kind of shows that you're rich. I don't alter, I have enough stuff already, so I might as well.
It shows you're rich, and what else does it show? It reinforces your power in the community, and it very subtly also says the community is also important. It's not just about me. It's partially about the community. Now, you might not actually be very sincere about that, but that is part of the message of putting it out in public. Members of the upper class, the elite, the people with the money, the old money in Athens and elsewhere in Greece in the 8th century have a perception problem, just like lots of wealthy people have always had perception problems. Not their perception, but how other people perceive them. And this is one strategy for how to deal with that. All right. See you Thursday.